Welcome to The Plain Truth, the show where we try to get into some of the mysteries, anomalies, and dirty underbelly of the world around us. I'm your host, Plain, otherwise known as Paul, and joining me this week is Jim Willie, who's editor of the Hat Trick Letter, found on the goldenjackass.com website. Jim, are you there?
I'm here. Good to be with you.
Well, thanks for coming. And Jerry, my friend, are you along?
I'm here. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Heather.
Well, then let's get down to the dirty stuff. All kinds of things are going on in the world around us nowadays, and hard to know where to begin. But recently you've talked about a war on Gazprom. Can you expand on that?
Well, yeah, there's a tremendous amount of deception going on when it comes to anything related to Gazprom and Russia. It took me a couple of weeks. Just about a year ago now, Cyprus hit the scene, and the story that was told was that it was about confiscation of accounts, and it was about bail-ins and resolving bank insolvency. And the more I studied about what was going on with Cyprus, the more I realized, wait a minute, Gazprom Bank is a big bank. It's not just a company, a conglomerate for natural gas and drilling for natural gas, but they've got a bank subsidiary, and it's very large, and it's located in Cyprus. And there are a couple of other large banks like Sberbank in Cyprus. And then I came to learn even a couple months later that Russia was using Cyprus as a big center to buy gold. And then I learned that there's a whole lot more going on. This I learned right away when Cyprus broke. And this is a little known fact to the public, especially the American public, it's just unbelievably badly informed. Russia and their central bank and their major banking functions all use Cyprus as a clearinghouse. So when the West attacked Cyprus and tried to shut it down and bail in and confiscate or do whatever it was that they did, what they were doing was attacking Russia and Gazprom and interfering with the Gazprom bank and interfering with Russian acquisition of gold. Then the second attack against Gazprom came in the setting of Syria. That was much more obvious. I had been expecting something to take place because the Iran gas pipeline, which I call the Shiite pipeline, because it's got connections with the northeast Iraqi region, which is Shiite. Very few people realize, but Iraq is something like 2/3 Shiite. So we tried to go in there and install a Sunni and Ba'ath party, whatever, and it's just a magnificent screw up. So we attack Syria, have the Saudis use some chemical weapons. The Western press blame it on the loyalists in Syria and Damascus, aided by the Russians. Oh, this is so obvious. They wanted to block the new Gazprom pipeline that would start in Iran, go through Iraq, and end up in Syria and feed the Western European markets. Now, the third act against Russian Gazprom is far more blatant and far more desperate. I believe it's to create a firewall in Ukraine and to do a futile extension of NATO in a grand overreach. People ask, well, what's this Gazprom going to be? And I said, well, you know how OPEC is the nucleus of all the major oil producers, and the Saudis are the head for that, the lead nation, whatever the Saudis decide on for policy. All right, well, that's going to turn into Russian Gazprom with a natural gas co-op and a skeletal system of pipelines going from Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, the Middle East, into Europe, through Ukraine. Okay, who controls the pipelines? It's Russia. So that's what the attacks are about, is to forestall the Russian control of Europe, which many really smart people, including people like analysts like William Engdahl, they say Europe is the grand prize. If the United States loses Europe, to Russia and China, it's game over for the United States and the West. So the elements of the petrodollar system are fracturing right now, plank by plank. And I think gradually you're going to see the new eastern planks coming into view in a new construction with Gazprom at the center, the pipelines, their skeletal system. And it's really going to be strangling the petrodollar and bringing about its death. Watch the Saudis. That's your kind of your swing vote in the energy trade. And watch attitudes of Germany. That's your swing vote in the European arena. So a lot going on.
You're reading my mind there, Jim. I was going to ask about the Saudis next there. But by the way, first a brief note for our listeners. I'm sorry, but Jim is on the road right now, and sometimes we have Skype, sound quality issues. We're just doing the best we can. We apologize about that. But getting back to those Saudis, so it looks like the U.S. is selling them down the river. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, if you look at the game book, the playbook for these bank syndicate operatives and their operations and their schemes and their decade-long plans, what they do is they create these cutouts. Okay, here it is, 1955. Let's create some Arab cutouts. Let's use this model right out of a book. Let's help them to create some kingdoms. We'll make them all ridiculously wealthy, and they will serve in a hidden way the U.S. and British Empire. And it's straight out of the chapter on cutouts. Let's create this, and let's do this and this and this, and let's give them these powers and these privileges and give them these marching orders. Well, then enter Kissinger in the early 70s. And believe it or not, I'm coming to learn this as a very scummy fact for the West and the British and Americans. The Arabs did not decide, hey, let's punish the Americans and Western Europeans for their Israeli support. What happened was Kissinger walked in and said, look, we just killed off the gold standard in 71, the Bretton Woods, and we need to create something stable to serve like a gold standard, but not a gold standard. We're going to make a petro standard, but to help this along, it would be helpful if you Arabs would triple or more the oil price. And there's some big benefits for everybody. The big Rockefeller oil companies in the West will all become really wealthy. They'll have to deal with the windfall profit tax. Remember that in the 70s? And furthermore, with all this extra money, you Arab sheiks and royals and kings, you can all be multi-billionaires and have yachts and palaces and property all over the world. And besides, we'd like it if you'd kick back some of those petro profits and surpluses and buy a bunch of military weapons, because we have friends in the Defense Department too, and it's all part of the big game of bankers, oil companies, and defense contractors. This is the 70s. And the Shah of Iran loved the plan. He said, great, I've been having a hard time putting together funds to buy more weapons. And if this would really work out well for us. And the Saudi royals thought, wonderful, we can build cities in the desert. This is great. We can buy London property. We can buy up half of the Wall Street banks, maybe. We can partner. Okay, so that's the Saudi cutout plan. And now notice that this Arab Spring, which is one of the biggest screw-ups in the history of American foreign policy, is disrupting the Arab monarch nations. Is there any evidence for 1,000 or more years in the Arab world of a love of democracy? No, they're monarchs. They're not dictatorships. They're monarchs, and when they get ugly, they turn into little nasty fascist monarchs. But they're monarchs. So what in God's name is Washington doing, creating an Arab Spring to bring about democracy in the Arab world? It's lunatic. So what they're doing is something much, much different from what they claim. it's always acceptable to the Western audience to say, well, we're trying to spread democracy in the Arab world. Well, most of the Western nations are not, oh, I don't want to say smart enough. They're just not alert enough. They're not saying, well, wait a minute, monarchs don't like democracy. What's that all about? That's not going to work out well. What I've come to learn in the last few months is the Arab Spring is a disruptive policy from a long tradition of Langley disruption, destabilization plans like the Gladio Project of Europe, like many others, like disrupting Libya. And their motive is to steal the central bank gold. These are fascists who love the National Socialism, Nazi, National Socialism. I mean, I got news for you. For maybe since the Kennedy assassination, the United States has been a secretive fascist colony. So now that the Arab Spring has created some problems with the Saudis got screwed in Egypt. The Saudis were responsible for funding the revolt that kicked out the U.S. puppet, Mohammed Morsi. So the Saudis and the Americans...
Mubarak, or are you talking?
Well, Mubarak was replaced by Mohammed Morsi.
Right, and then they got rid of him, and now they're, yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, but it was Morsi who was the puppet put in by the Americans, and, I ask a question, like a knee-jerk, oh, gee, I don't know if that the Egyptians have much gold. No gold in their central banks to steal, which is what we do. I mean, with 144 tons of Gaddafi gold in Libya, sitting easily to steal in London, but it's a little different. Tunisia moved out its gold. I believe it went to Malta and then points in Western Europe for safe holding. It seems like the U.S. and the British and some of the other Western European nations are always there at the ready to help relieve these Arab nations of their gold and keep it safe for them, but it never seems to go back into their possession. All right, so you got Egypt and the backfire. Egypt does have some pearls. It's the Suez Canal. I mean, gosh, the Suez Canal is where all the Persian Gulf oil that heads to European markets passes through. So the Egyptians are a very valuable strategic nation, and they're now partners with the Saudis in opposition to the United States. So now you got all these London banks who are, for the last 2 years, in desperate straits to come up with gold to meet demands of not only the market, but some of their bigger clients whose allocated gold accounts have been stolen, misused, hypothecated, whatever silly word you want to use. Hypothecated means stolen. So the London bankers are desperate for gold. Well, guess whose gold they're stealing now? It's the Saudis. The Saudis are the cutout that has now served its purpose. And, the ugly secret regarding Saudi oil, they don't have anywhere near the reserves they claim, and they don't have jack shit for excess capacity for production. We're throwing the Saudis under the bus and stealing their gold. They're going to lose 100% of their gold that's not sitting in Saudi Arabia, and they're going to lose some of their gold that is sitting in Saudi Arabia when the U.S. and their other little agents, we're seeing their handiwork in Ukraine, the U.S. and their handy agents start disrupting things and blaming it on terrorists and radical Wahhabists and whatever. We're watching the Nazi game book, the playbook, their methods, their modus operandi. It's becoming plain as day. Since when does the United States, nation after nation, work shoulder to shoulder with Al-Qaeda without being the control center of Al-Qaeda?
Well, Jim, come on. Al-Qaeda is based in Langley. I think we all know that. Hey, a couple of things there.
We don't all know that. We do not all know that. I don't think more than 5% of American intelligent, informed people know that.
Well, what did that head of the CIA say? That they'll know their disinformation campaign is successful when everything the American people believe is false? That's a famous quote. So maybe we're heading that way. But a couple of things. One is I think that the petrodollar standard also was a way of shafting Germany and Japan. They ended up having to pay a huge tax, essentially, to it kept them down for a long time. So that was another aspect. But moving on, some say these days that the U.S.'s main strategy is simply to try to blow things up. And so maybe the Saudis are next in line. But do you think this is the general game plan for slowing down a BRICS or Eurasian challenge?
Yes, I do. Before I get to that great point, bringing up the German and Japanese industrial, it's kind of an attack. When we put in the petrodollar and arrange for petro surpluses with the Saudis to go back into treasury bonds and establish the global banking reserve systems founded in treasury bonds, there was an added motive, and that was really the architect was Kissinger, acting as an agent for the Rockefeller families. The Germans and the Japanese were close to 100% dependent on oil. And the United States at the time was maybe about only 1/3 dependent on oil. Now it's more like 2/3 dependent on oil. So it was a strategic blow against the growing might of Germany and Japan. Isn't it ironic that we attacked them again in the 70s, 30, 40 years after World War II, when a lot of the motives for World War II were to keep down the German and Japanese industrial emerging giants? So sometimes things never change. All right, back to the BRICS and Eurasia. I think the action in Ukraine is a giant European firewall attempt. Again, it's targeting Gazprom. They've got the lunatic idea that if they capture at least the western provinces of Ukraine, they can control the Gazprom pipelines, the valves, the big transit centers. And those transit centers are important. They feed the main pipelines going to Poland and Bulgaria and Romania, but it feeds the Hungarian lines and goes all the way across Western Europe. Back about 5 years ago, 2000, I think it was 7. So 7 years ago, Gazprom got shut down largely, not shut off, but shut down, reduced heavily. And Germans and Italians noticed that their gas pressure went way down. All right, so that's the effect if Gazprom shuts down the flow. To me, it's lunatic. It's like saying, well, we control the gas station. Let's fly the flag over all the Exxon stations in North America. Well, what if the supply trucks don't show up? What are they controlling? Now, these are some stupid plans, again, that really point to hidden motives. Now, notice also, it's not ever in the Western news that some of the major Western oil giants are all across Eastern Europe and working with discoveries in Ukraine. I'm referring to ExxonMobil, Chevron, Royal Dutch Shell, and ENI out of Italy. They had been interfered with in the last year or more, maybe about 18 months at most, 12 to 18 months. They had these discoveries of gas in the western provinces of Ukraine, but they couldn't proceed with the contracts because Putin got in the way. And I think that on the tangent, Gazprom had some rights, and it was very complicated. There were some oligarchs of Russian origin, of Ukrainian origin. They're in there. These oligarchs are main players. They have their own armies. These are billionaires with their own armies and their own lands and their own businesses. And a lot of them got scarfed up and stolen. This is what the Americans do. They steal their central bank gold in the middle of the night, and they divert $70 billion of oligarch money, Ukraine government official funds, and it all just shows up in Switzerland, where they're keeping it safe, but it'll never return. So here's what I believe is going on, and this is not an original thought of my own. It's given to me on a silver platter. Part of it I figured out on my own. Obviously, some of it's not complicated. It's about natural gas supply control. But the Voice, my really incredibly powerful, reliable contact source of information, said Putin set a trap in Ukraine for the West. He realized he was losing ground, and all he could really do was get in the way. So what he did was he pulled out of Kiev, and the U.S. just walked right into the trap. So they came in, and the goal, according to the Voice, for the trap, manifested in the trap, is that all the Eastern European nations are watching closely to the rape and pillage of Ukraine. They saw the theft of the stolen bank, the theft of the gold in the central bank. They're seeing the movement in with the big Western giants, the energy companies, and what they're going to do next is proceed with fracking and contaminate the water table. It's ironic, but in Eastern Europe, they're more aware in protests of the contamination of the water table from fracking than the North Americans are, and in particular the Americans. I know there are a lot of stories about 10,000 sites in the United States where the water pools can be set on fire. This is not progress. That is yet another Obama sabotage of the United States economy. When you do fracking, which kisses the ass and coddles the Halliburton monopoly on fracking chemicals, you do not really foment progress and energy independence if you contaminate your water table. This is not progress. And this is what the U.S. is trying to export to Eastern Europe. So the U.S. walked into the trap, stole and raped and pillaged everything in sight. Snipers were hired by Blackstone to kill from the rooftop and make sure they got completely out of order. And all they're really doing is delaying the birth pangs of the Eurasian trade zone. When these European nations like Bulgaria and Poland and Romania and Western Ukraine watch what happens with the rape and the pillage of their resources and their banking reserves, they're going to run into Russian hands and join the Eurasian trade zone. When the Eurasian trade zone links up the 14 time zones going from the Atlantic to the Pacific in that vast double continent, I don't know why it's two continents, it should be one, but it's going to be one when it considers itself a trade zone. The U.S. and the British will be outside looking in, jerking off. This is not going to invite the Anglo-Americans. That's what they're trying to block. And the energy supply sources are going to be largely Russian. And for vengeance, the Russians are going to do a couple things. They're going to cut off the gas. They're going to say we got more reliable clients in Asia. And they're going to start selling off treasury bonds. This is going to get very ugly, and the backfire might not take the 18 months required in Cairo, Egypt for a counter coup. I'm hearing that it might take just 3 or 4 months. And already
Jim.
a couple of key guys in the Maidan organization have been murdered. And I immediately thought, well, gee, is Putin getting his special forces working overtime, knocking off some of the chief lieutenants and captains in Maidan's Nazi regime in Kiev? And I heard a surprise. No, this is the U.S.-led group killing off some of the medium-level guys who know too much.
Well, there's also the brown shirt phenomenon.
Yes, but beware that when Nazis go in, led by the American Nazis out of Langley, after the flags are raised and the buildings are taken over, they kill off certain people who might not be all that reliable to have lying around, who know too much and might start talking and leaking to the press and maybe diverting some funds or doing whatever to betray the movement. This is what Nazis do.
Hey, Jim, there's another aspect to this. A lot of people, not in the the English language world, but in, let's say, the European world, feel that the Ukrainian military, and I don't know, 2/3 of the Ukraine, actually is relatively sympathetic to Russia. And so that if Russia wanted to, they could bring Yanukovych back. And indeed, the last couple of days they're saying he's in the Ukraine again. He's in Kharkov, supposedly. And I don't know if they'll do that or not. But, the Ukrainian army or whatever ordered them to fight in the Crimea, and they didn't, right? I mean, 85% of the soldiers and the ships and everything, they just transferred it straight over to Russia. So that's why they're creating essentially a national guard there, is because the army isn't willing to fight Russia.
Not to mention,
Why should they?
Sure, but the point would be that if Russia could bring in their last legally elected president or whatever, and have the Ukrainian army, essentially in front of the parade, so to speak, who could, it would be Russia could go to the UN and say, hey, look, we want permission to overturn this terrible, coup d'etat. And obviously America would veto that. But I mean, from a PR point of view, it would be quite something to see. The U.S. might lose that. I don't know if this is going to happen at all, of course, but I'm just saying the Ukrainian army is not really either ready or willing to fight Russia, it looks like.
Well, I think that there's a point here being missed, and that's the value in the passage of time.
Mm-hmm.
As time passes, this goes back to the point I just made a few minutes ago. The entire Eastern European region, over the passage of time, will notice the rape and pillage going on by the U.S.-led regime and the U.S.-led energy companies and the U.S.-led bankers and the U.S.-led security forces. It only will happen. The value will be gained only will happen after the passage of time. Putin is in no rush. Putin is seeing that as time passes, it only gets better. There's no rush. Of course, tomorrow he could execute a counter coup. There's no great value in doing so because he would lose the passage of time and the changing in the hearts of Eastern Europeans. He wants all Eastern Europe to join the Eurasian trade zone, and as they do, so will come Germany. They need the passage of time. Because during this time, more and more will be revealed about the scummy behavior of the bankers, the energy companies, the security forces, all of these different things, news networks. Oh, besides, why is Putin in any kind of a rush to take some overt action when you've got an implosion going on in Kiev? They're out of money. The U.S. drained them of $70 billion with the Swiss help. They're out of money. They're thinking right now, I got this from a client, one of my own hat-trick letter clients, who has a Ukrainian wife. Now, I'm not sure. I think he's in Germany with a Ukrainian wife. And he said, Jim, you're going to find this interesting, but they're already talking now in Kiev. The Maidan finance minister is talking about creating a new currency. And it's going to be heavily devaluated. And it's going to be a new breeding ground for price inflation. Why is Putin in any rush to prevent them from seeing price inflation as a result of this U.S. liberation? No, Putin is getting the hell out of the way and letting this thing implode financially, economically, and with public opinion as all Eastern European watches.
So I'm just wondering, do you think that it's essentially a redux of the first Orange Revolution where they kind of propped up a U.S.-friendly puppet and Putin just kind of bided his time and let things play out and then put his own guy in Yanukovych?
Well, I think that Putin is going to try to benefit and exploit the passage of time, because in the passage of time, you're going to see the Ukraine economy collapse. They're already talking about, I heard this from a German client of mine with a Ukrainian wife. He said that there's news out there in the Kiev television news networks that they're going to create a new currency, a new hryvnia, and it's going to be devaluated heavily. So Putin has no rush here to get in the way of the implosion and the huge price inflation and the tragic shortages of supplies, while the public opinion across all Eastern Europe turns against the West. So I think he's going to let it play out. And then when it's done, these nations of Eastern Europe are going to run into the Russian hands to join the Eurasian trade zone. And I think Germany is going to become a very important nation where right now, many people think of Germany as just a very cohesive, homogeneous group. It's not. It's got many factions. The industrialists, the commercial arena, the commercial sector, they're very much tied to Russia. The banking sector is very much tied to London and New York. And I think that's going to start to really break away. And the political forces of Germany are very soon going to be overt and in full view on stage, start talking about more constructive ties, commercially integrating commerce and banking functions with Russia and China, because that's where the future is. Germany is going to flip and join the Eurasian trade zone, and it's going to be a magnificent event. Putin really doesn't need Ukraine to join. He needs the example, the showcase of Ukraine in order to tip all of Eastern Europe, including Germany. Just watch Ukraine. Don't convert it. Just watch it. It's going to become an absolute chaos center and a sewer.
I mean, that's sort of what was happening before this coup took place, Jim. I mean, Germany was starting to cozy up with Russia and Putin. And you might make an argument that that was maybe one of the objectives of the coup, was to break that friendship apart.
Well, very possibly. There are a lot of entanglements that were interfered with. And, then the U.S. marches in and says we want all NATO support. Even this treaty, it's called the Bulgarian Memorandum. No, I'm sorry, the Budapest Memorandum. It's hardly a big formal treaty. It was more like something where people sign on the back of a napkin over drinks in Budapest. This is not a treaty. Watch the treaty kind of unfold, where Germany might eventually say, hey, wait a minute, we've looked at this Budapest Memorandum, and, it doesn't really have a lot of weight behind it. And besides, look what's happening in Ukraine right now. This is a disaster. This has not worked out well. This is not meeting the objectives of what we originally thought you Americans were going to do. So I think it's going to just fall apart.
Jim, it's a bit rich for the U.S. to talk about the Budapest Memorandum. When we sent in snipers and gangs with, nails and boards and stuff, you know what I mean? If the president had to flee for his life to a neighboring country, it's kind of like we're supposed to agree to not intervene, right? The West would not intervene in the Ukraine and Russia would not intervene. But that's a joke. Hey, a related question to this, though, is do you expect Russia and China to go on the offensive soon in any way? How might they do that?
Well, I don't know about anything militarily. The West used their violent coup, the rooftop snipers, stealing central bank, violence in the streets, fires set to buildings, a lot of mayhem, and that's what we are using. The West is using for a calling card. I don't expect that the Russians are going to reply in the same manner. I think what they're going to do is rely on attacks of Western vulnerability. Let's face it, if they go tit for tat with military maneuvers and coups and things like that, it's going to be a lose-lose situation that escalates and just gets to the point where eventually one side points missiles at the other. Well, that's a lose-lose situation. I think what we're going to see instead is Russia and China. And besides, we got to keep in mind, China is right behind Putin every step of the way. I think what they're going to do is they're going to go after the vulnerability of debt finance for not just the United States, but the sovereign debt of the PIGS nations and European nations. They're going to go after the vulnerability of currency stability. Look, let's face it, the pound, the euro, and the dollar, they're not strong. And they're going to go after bonds by dumping them, treasury bonds, because what's the only big force that's holding up the U.S. Treasury bonds but QE? It's the bond monetization with background support from the interest rate swap derivatives. So I think that we're going to get a situation where the U.S. and London simply refuse to admit failure. It's not going to be a military response by Russia. They're going to try to earn a standoff.
Okay, but would that be, I mean, as part of that, would they do a lot of things at once? I mean, I've heard people say that if they cut the gas supply to Western Europe by, say, 20%, the price would go up 20%.
I don't know about that. I don't know about any price effect. When you say they're going to cut off, if they cut off supply by 20%, the effect will be that the supply is cut off by 20%.
Well, I don't know. What's your opinion? Some say that the price would therefore go up a certain amount, but I mean, I would think that would be more in the winter than in the summer.
No, why would the price go up? Because the demand went up in a totally controlled market? No, price and demand are not the dynamics at work. That's I think, a false impression. Okay, here's a little hint on how I think it might go. 2 months ago, Russian giant energy firm Rosneft, which, by the way, is twice the size of ExxonMobil, they bought Platts Energy Desk from Morgan Stanley in Wall Street. Why would they do that? Because they want more control of the pricing mechanisms. Now, I think what's going to happen is you get something like a 20%. That's like an ante on the poker table, a 20% cutoff of Gazprom gas to Western Europe. It's not going to jolt the prices upward, because a higher price would not bring about new supply. This is a controlled market. Most of the big markets are controlled. Gold, oil, natural gas. They're controlled. They don't have free market dynamics of higher price spawns new production. That doesn't work. And besides, you need 18 months to 2 years anyway to get any kind of response. What's going to happen is you're going to see a cutoff of like 20 or 25% of gas supply to Western Europe just severely hit their economy. I heard the argument numerous times that, oh gosh, Russia lost its big card at the poker table because winter's over. I don't buy that for a minute, not a minute, because they got industry that relies heavily on natural gas input from Gazprom and Russia. So you're telling me that the homes are more important to heat than the steel mills and the car factories? I don't think so. So Russia's got its card to play. It's going to be a whacking of the Western European economies, and let them try to support their bond structure, because when he's cutting off with the right hand gas supply, with the left hand he's going to be selling sovereign bonds for the treasury bonds, UK gilts, and Western European sovereign bonds. This is going to be a double attack of energy cutback, cutoff, and bond dumping. It's already started.
What do you make of the people that say, the United States has a lot of gas and they can just export this gas over to Europe to kind of make up for the Russian supply? I mean, it sounds ludicrous because, you're going to have to ship the gas over for one thing. And I mean, I don't understand how people can think that they're just going to replace it that quickly and that easily.
Well, they're not thinking.
Jim, it's just more American BS, smoke and mirrors.
They don't think. There's no infrastructure. What do we have? Gas pipelines across the Atlantic? I mean, it's stupid talk. It's talk to satisfy really dumb 80 and 90 IQ Bush family level intelligence in the United States. There's no even LNG facilities. I mean, do we have off South Carolina, New Jersey, and Massachusetts lots and lots of big domed LNG facilities for servicing Western Europe? Of course not. We don't have anything like that. It's moron talk. And you know, it's just like the 9th out of 10 elements of moron talk that you see dominate the U.S. press. We don't even have gas independence in the United States. What we got is this fracking that coddles to the Halliburton monopoly of fracking chemicals. And by the way, they were responsible for the Gulf of Mexico, Deepwater Horizon sabotage because Halliburton had lots and lots and lots of on-site, on-land fracking contracts, drilling contracts. So shut down the Gulf, and it just works right into the Halliburton hands. You know, we've got Darth Vader working with Halliburton, and they do not have LNG facilities to service. If anybody's going to come to the rescue of Europe with gas supply, it's going to be Qatar. But they don't have the facilities and excess capacity to come through. Russia has a monopoly, and a monopoly is defined by over 80%. The other players, they're small. Qatar is not small, but in the entire global picture, they're not able to pick up that kind of slack. There's one other player that can, and that's Iran. But who's interfering with the pipelines? The United States. I mean, this is very complicated stuff. Just last week, the Saudis made a $1.5 billion donation to the Pakistani government, and one of the conditions was that they block all contracts for construction of the Iran-Pakistani gas pipeline. You know, we've got all these different things that are interfering with progress. The United States is not constructive.
Jim, what about all the gas in the Eastern Mediterranean? Or, for that matter, off the coast of the Crimea?
Well, those are two big stories right now. When Syria broke, I got indications and not much information that, you know, this might have something to do with contracts in the Eastern Mediterranean. And I thought that's all settled with the Israeli Tamar floating platform. And they said, well, after a couple months, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know all about the Syrian angles. I was aware about the connection of the Iran pipeline, the Shiite pipeline going through Iraq, but I was not fully informed as to the conflict of rights that are being challenged, the offshore oil and gas rights in the Eastern Mediterranean. Lebanon and Syria each have offshore rights, and the United States and Israel would like to take it all. Why not? They're Nazis. It's what they do. So
what about Cyprus?
Well, Cyprus, they have some extensive offshore drilling going on also, but that appears to be a little bit more mature in its development with contracts and understandings, and there's several Western European energy giants involved there. So the U.S. doesn't go in there and step on, Spanish and Italian energy giant hands. No, those are kind of our partners. We step on other hands. We step on Eastern hands. That's what we do. The violations that took place in Iraq, for instance, in 2003, involved Russian and Chinese contracts. They all were abrogated. So, the Crimea is another area of offshore drilling. And I came to learn just a few weeks ago that ExxonMobil has an $800 million commitment so far. And I don't believe they've got a lot of development on platforms constructed in the Black Sea. But they do have close to a $1 billion commitment. That's not a lot of money to these energy giants. And what happened was Exxon had some success on the Romanian coast of the Black Sea. And they used that to go ahead and I've got some pictures of, oh gosh, what's the name of the CEO of Exxon? I can't think of his name. Has an R in it. Anyway, the CEO of Exxon is pictured with Putin, all smiles, with the coast of the Crimea in the background. I think it's Sevastopol. And everybody's buddy. Everybody's a buddy. That's going to fast change. All these contracts now that Exxon has are with the old Kiev Ukrainian government. I think they're all going to be abrogated. I think they're all going to have to be rewritten. And guess who has the offshore jurisdiction in the Black Sea but the Crimean province? So this is almost funny what's going on. It's going to turn into a real mess, but really the strengths of Russia and China when it comes to the finances and the energy, I think are 20-1 versus the U.S. and the NATO nations. What's going to come next is a cutoff of gas and a dumping of treasury bonds, but that's going to lead to the giant reaction, the tremendous climax reaction, and that is what I'm forecasting to be the Russians join up with China and they say, we're going to help to determine the price of oil. It's going to be in yuan currency terms, and we, the Russians, are going to demand from Europe that they make payments for Russian oil and gas in yuan. That will make a sledgehammer statement on the table that Russia and China are working together, and that any attempts to isolate Russia are an abysmal failure. If
Okay,
China's
Jim.
their partner, Russia's not isolated. Besides, I got a joke. I say, how do you surround a country with 12 time zones? That's a big lasso.
Become an ocean? Hey, Jim, so what are some good signs to look for that will show when the petrodollar switch is imminent?
Many indications I think are going to come. We saw one a couple months ago where Russia with the Rosneft. I mean, you could say, no, Rosneft bought it, not Russia. Well, these are Russian giant companies, and they're largely controlled by the Kremlin because they're of national security significance. Gazprom has offices in the Kremlin. The previous president of Russia was Dmitry Medvedev, whose past post was CEO of Gazprom. These Russian energy giants are really Kremlin offices. So I'm expecting we're going to see an unusual sequence of events where the price of oil is something that the West can no longer control. Notice that there was a real big hint that took place in the last, close to 2 years. Remember when the Brent crude oil price, often called European crude oil price, was $15, $18, $20 higher than West Texas? Why did they converge? I mean, these are important questions. Why did Russia want the Platts desk from Morgan Stanley? Why did the Brent oil price converge to Texas? I think it means that the Russians are going to start controlling the Texas price. The global oil price. The Russians are going to start to control the oil price. And they're going to, here is the essence of the petro yuan. The Russians control the price, and it's going to be in yuan terms, and the majority supplier will be the Russians. And a key echo, the Saudis follow suit. Notice the Saudis are making big overtures. They sent Prince Salman a week ago into China for economic commercial talk. Okay, what they're doing is they're setting the groundwork for the petro-yuan. The Saudis are going to accept yuan from the Chinese. In fact, when the Russians start dictating terms for European payment for their oil and gas, the Chinese are going to do the same. They're going to say, you want our business, the Chinese purchases of oil, like from Saudi? Well, we're going to pay in yuan. You don't like it? We'll find somebody else. And the Saudis are going to say, hey, no, don't get the wrong idea. We'll take your yuan. And that'll be the birth of the yuan petro standard. Now, the standard is not a locked item. It's not. I mean, I got into a petty argument with William Engdahl in November 06 in Munich at a conference, and I thought he was a total effing idiot. He's a brilliant man and a great analyst, but he interrupted me 3 times when I said the petrodollar standard. He said, no, it's not a standard, Jim. You keep saying it. I said, well, de facto standard. Call it what you want. 5 minutes later, no, Jim, it's not a standard. I said, well, it's a de facto standard. What's your point here, Bill? It's a de facto standard. People across the world buy oil in dollars. It's a standard. Wake up. What's your problem? It got heated. It got weird. And he said, look, I got other clients I need to talk to. So our meeting was cut short because the stupid fool who can't conduct simple conversations, William Engdahl, couldn't get past the point that the petrodollar was, for all effects and purposes, a freaking standard. It's fracturing now, Bill. And what we're going to get is a petro-yuan standard that's going to require 3 important parties: Russia, China, Saudi Arabia. And when Germany becomes the 4th, I call them the 4th leg on the Eurasian trade zone table. When the Germans join, they're going to say, we got no problem in supporting the ruble or the yuan. We'll pay in either. And what you're going to get is really the rumblings of barter trade. I've been hearing more and more in response to questions I asked The Voice. The Voice is working on not only gold trade, big significant gold purchases in the hundreds of millions that are satisfied in weeks, but he's working on bilateral barter systems. Whenever you hear gold trade settlement, just think as parallel to that, barter systems, where 2 nations. I love to use the example of China supplying finished products to Bolivia for copper, silver, and other metals. Okay, well, how are they going to pay for that? Well, they may not need to pay at all, because if they've got a yuan swap facility working, the value of all the metals going to China might be equal or close to the value of all the finished products going to Bolivia. So really what's important is handling the difference on a net basis. Well, if they can get past that, what you're going to get is a lot of different pairs of nations doing trade. It's going to be bilateral settlement, and it's going to set up a very important system where gold trade notes will serve as letters of credit. And it's going to have a heart called the BART4. And I don't have a lot of details for it. Actually, I only have the rough cut description of how it works and its name, BART4, B-A-R-T-F-O-R. Maybe it's barter between foreign nations, or barter for nations, barter for trade. But here's the big rub when it comes to this gold trade settlement on a net basis and the bilateral BART deals and all the yuan swap facility. What gets cut out is deadbeat nations. What does the U.S. export? Well, its main export is treasury bonds, mortgage bonds, maybe titles to property. Well, unfortunately, a lot of that trade in paper, in debt paper, in securities, is fraudulent. And in the last 2 years, you've seen the quantitative easing, the bond monetization, pick up a lot of speed. I think it's going to double and triple in volume, not taper. You can't taper when you don't have clients on the other side bidding. You don't taper when the rest of the world is considering your dollar as toxic. You don't taper when you're isolated and you have no alternatives, and you really can't reduce your $1 trillion budget deficit in the U.S. government. You can't taper when you're stuck in the corner with monetary policy in a dead end, the Weimar chapter. So we're going to see an acceleration of nations in the world follow the lead of Russia and China and conclude we don't really need our treasury bonds in our banking system. They're not going to be worth anything to us. We better start selling them, diversifying out of them, converting into other debt paper, converting into hard assets before they go worthless, before we have this global conference for the U.S. government debt default restructure, where the U.S. military will surround the meeting and help to encourage the terms. This is where we're heading. What we're going to see in the next couple of months is the emergence of China as the global mediator. They're first going to mediate in the Middle East and the Persian Gulf. They're going to say, hey, look, we're partners, important partners commercially to Iran and Saudi Arabia, and we'd like all this Muslim squabbling to come to an end. We're important customers of Iranian oil and gas, and just as a footnote, Iran controls 30% of the global gas reserves in the world. China is going to then say, we're also partners to Saudi Arabia. We have important projects going on with petrochemicals on the coast of the Red Sea in Saudi Arabia. We cannot afford Saudis and Iranians to be in severe conflict because we in China rely on both of them. And watch them follow up their tremendous mediation and diplomacy role with bringing about the petro-yuan, where they say, we got no problem, Iran has no problem in taking oil and gas payments in yuan. And now Saudi is going to make an announcement, and Saudi is going to be dragged into this. They may do it willingly, but the Saudis are isolated. They don't have their U.S. protector anymore. The Saudis are going to say, we have no problem in accepting yuan payments for oil to our Chinese customer, who is our biggest customer. So there can be some big changes. And on the European continent, Germany's going to become the regional diplomacy master. They're going to mediate between the Russians and the Anglo-Americans. And the ironic twist is these diplomats are going to bring about the birth of the Eurasian trade zone. The Chinese are going to be a very important second leg to this. The Russians are the first. I think the Saudis and the Germans are going to become the third and fourth. The Germans already are very divided. Their bankers are tilted to the west, and their commercial industry is tilted to the east. So the Germans are going to eventually say, we have no problem in paying in rubles or yuan to Russia for the oil and gas. And for all the finished products coming from Chinese factories, we have no problem paying in yuan. And it's going to be the death of the petrodollar. It's going to come, and it's going to come, I think, in a loud way, the death of the petrodollar. And the American press is going to start running editorials in their financial sections saying that we're going to have a shock in the United States, and the shock is going to be ugly. And the shock is going to be powerful, and it's going to come from the petrodollar being harmed irreparably.
I know you don't generally like to give exact timelines as to when things are going to happen, and I guess a lot of this is kind of already happening now. But the mother of all gas deals between Russia and China is said to be pretty much a fait accompli, and I believe the speculation is that it's going to be announced in May when Putin visits China. Do you think that's going to probably be the fulcrum when this thing falls off the cliff?
It could very well be. It's rumored to be ready for a May summit meeting where Putin visits Beijing. I would be very surprised if they don't capitalize on that May meeting and use it for their purposes. Something might happen before that, though, because the U.S. just seems to be, I don't know what their problem is. They seem to be compulsively poking a stick in the Russian bear's face.
Well, Jim, it's called geopolitics. It's domination of the planet.
Well, I know, but gosh, when you threaten to cut off Visa and MasterCard and SWIFT bank usage, don't you really invite Russia to say, well, we're going to make all our payments in yuan, so you Europeans, if you want gas, you're going to have to find a way to pay us, and maybe the easiest thing you could do is to kick these Americans out of your room.
Yeah. Hey, I got a related question, Jim. Russia is making a lot of moves to develop eastern Siberia, Sakhalin, and then right around the North Korean border. And Japan has signed all kinds of deals, like tens of billions of dollars worth of deals over there. And the Russian government is going to make it an ultra-low tax zone, something like 5% taxes. Any thoughts on that? I mean, this plays into the whole Russia-China alliance, of course.
Yeah, what it's going to do is two things. I haven't thought this entirely out. Two things. First is that Japan will therefore join the Eurasian trade zone. Second thing is that the Russians don't have sufficient capital and, capacity to develop Sakhalin for all it's going to be worth. They need the European energy giants like Royal Dutch Shell, like British Petroleum. What the Russians are going to do is to say to the Europeans, they're going to try to divide the Europeans from the Americans. They're going to say, look, we want your partnership. We need your technology. We need your capacity. We need your engineering expertise. We need your equipment. We need your tubes and your connections to industry to supply piping and structural materials. You've got to get rid of your U.S. partnership in order to proceed with us. So it'll be Korea and Japan joining, and the Western European energy giants fracturing off from the Americans. That's what I see forthcoming.
Well, I'm here in Japan, and I see a big deal as the Japan is trying to come up close to Russia and then position herself for the opening of North Korea because there are tremendous resources there. And so Japan is now fighting with South Korea all the time about everything. So it's kind of interesting. But any thoughts on North Korea? Do you think they'll open up there and be part of the game?
No. Since 2005, I've thought that there's a dumb room. The dumb room has been war with Iran. And now I think the dumb room is development of North Korea. So I don't enter the dumb room.
Well, Jim, that's fine. I don't have any answers. I just say that there are trillions of dollars of resources sitting there. And the question is, right now, China, Russia, Japan, and South Korea all look at them and say, I don't want you to get them.
I think trillions of dollars in resources is an exaggeration of 100-fold. So even if it's, I don't know, I have trouble with these big numbers. Even if we're talking about several $100 billion worth of resources and minerals and offshore rights and all this, China's going to take it all. I mean, I have thought for the longest time when I do enter the dumb room that North Korea is an agent for rattling the West used by China. Oh gosh, wasn't it 3 or 4 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago that we heard about, hostilities by North Korea? My gosh, we may go to war. Well, fine. I don't go into that dumb room. I have a very smart friend whose name I don't want to mention. He's in the journals once in a while. We had an argument in 2005, in September, and I said, no, we're not going to have a war with Iran. Nothing's going to happen. In 2006, we had the same argument. No, we're not going to have a war with Iran. In 2007, no, we're not going to have a war with Iran. In 2008, we're not going to have a war with Iran. In 2009, same. 2010, same. 2011, same. 2011, same. 2012. I get tired of this. I don't enter the dumb room. The dumb room is North Korea. Yeah, right. What are they going to do? Offer these inbred, incestuous, child-molesting jerkweeds running North Korea a few $100 million or $1 billion to develop? No. If it gets developed, they're all going to be hanged. It'll never happen. It's just dumb room talk. I got far better things to discuss than things like North Korea. I'd much rather talk about the London bankers without diving out a window.
Hey, Jim. Since we're off on a tangent here, a lot of strange things are going on around the world, from missing planes to very well-organized political demonstrations and riots and banksters jumping out of buildings. And what do you make of all this?
Well, the first thing is that I'd like to address the Malaysian missing airplane. I saw a picture, and I got to say that it looked rather convincing. It was the professor and the captain on Gilligan's Island, and the plane was in the background. And I think it's on Gilligan's Island. We're going to find out. I hope it's on Gilligan's Island because Ginger needs more attention.
I thought it was in Diego Garcia, but
it could very well be. All right, here's what I've heard. And, I got to preface this. I'll be honest with you. I don't like to BS anybody. I don't have definitive answers. What I do have is a lot of different voices on my ear. And what I'm hearing is that the plane was redirected, and for a few days it was in Kyrgyzstan, neighbor to Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan. It's in Chaos-stan.
Chaos-stan, exactly.
Okay, so it was for a while in Kyrgyzstan, where, the U.S. does not have Goldman Sachs and Blackstone agents running around. So little was heard. I've also heard that there were several very high-valued targets on board. The smart meter boys. There was more regarding kind of a hack-proof computer chip to prevent invasion and hacking and virus introductions and things like that they did not want to get in the hands of the Chinese, and now mysteriously is owned by a Rothschild heir or whatever. I've also heard that there were some very important people in opposition, like Al-Qaeda types in Indonesia, in opposition to their government. I also hear that there was an AWACS escort. I'm hearing things like, I was a Star Trek fan. I saw a lot of them. I saw, all 3 different series, including the weird one, Deep Space Nine, which it had its moments. But, we've got
all 3 of them.
We got some technology. Here's just a brief point. The reason why I bring up Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry, the creator and producer, he had some alien friends. That's what I'm hearing. So he wasn't just blessed with a lot of insight and imagination on futuristic concepts. He was hand-fed them. That's what one of my particular sources has to say, who knows quite a lot about alien spacecraft and has touched He has friends who's touched one. Not sat in the cockpit, that was my next question, but touched one. With outer skin that, for instance, converts heat to electricity. Just real advanced stuff. Apparently, we got maybe the exercise for the first time in an open forum of a tractor beam, a control device that takes over the cockpit, drags it along or controls it. I don't know whether it's active at the cockpit avionics end or active on pulling it by its hind quarters. I don't know. What about the technology? What about the ownership? And second, what about all the people on board? So I don't know. It might end up like the people who were unfortunately going to take off from Boston on that supposed flight that was without passengers that went into the World Trade Center, also controlled by a tractor beam that is a product of Raytheon. All right, enough of the plane in Malaysia. I don't know. We're going to find out, but it's a cross between the scientists and energy projects and firewall technology and futuristic weapons and much more. Regarding the bankers, though, this is where, I think rubber is hitting the road, or cranial matter is splattering on the sidewalks. I thought originally, well, it looks like they're trying to keep a lot of real nasty types from being exposed during some of these LIBOR, Forex, and maybe gold market investigations, and maybe some of it is emerging from the Deutsche Bank BaFin investigations that involved Interpol. Well, I got confirmation from The Voice and a few other corners. I've got a London banker. I call him Euro Raj. He confirmed a number of things. But then something came maybe a couple weeks after the first few bankers tried to fly and failed as they died on the sidewalks or, 20 stores down the top of another part of the big building. Something else came in as information, and it was that the one London banker named Brett Schmidt, the German guy from Deutsche Bank in London, Brett Schmidt and a couple others were killed because they were about to reveal how the J.P. Morgan London whale losses were over 100 billion. Their derivative losses were not the 1 billion, and then I think the latest figure they offer up is 8 billion. 8 billion is a figure that won't really cause a lot of problems. If they come out and say that it was $162.5 billion or anything over 100 billion, it's going to cause a problem for financial sector and maybe even government sector reaction. The other thing I heard was that there were some Vatican types who really didn't want to be exposed, so they hired some hits. Then I heard some rebuttal saying, well, the mafia is not that messy. Well, then I heard that Deutsche Bank had a lot of stolen Russian funds. So maybe it was Russian mafia that did the hits, like with the nail gun to the head, or pushing a guy off a 50-foot embankment where he crushes his skull below. The Russians don't care about style. The mafia boys in Rome do. So maybe we got a number of hits from a number of parties for a number of motives. But what strikes me in the bottom line is that there are a lot of corrupt quarters in the banking community that are nervous as hell. And that's what I think is going on.
Well, isn't that all of them, Jim?
Well, I've known some bankers in my day. The wife of a friend of mine was a loan officer, and I was introduced to a couple of her friends, including a manager once, and they were nice guys. But what I found interesting about them is they didn't even know that the mortgages in the United States were not, the 30-year mortgages were not offset by the 30-year Treasury bond. They were offset by the 10-year mortgage bond. I'm sorry. Damn, I didn't say that right. The 30-year mortgage was underpinned by the 10-year Treasury bond. They thought it was the 30-year Treasury bond because 30 and 30. No, it's a constant balancing act off the more liquid 10-year Treasury bond. But I don't think they're all corrupt. What happens is, okay, I want to explain the dynamics of a recent correct jackass forecast. Back in 2011, there was a lot of crosstalk with me and my sources and our little group of buddies. We're not really elevated, arrogant types. We're just well informed, and we like to share information. We do pretty well with coming up with forecasts together. But what happened was in 2011, The Voice took back one of his, not exactly a forecast, but kind of like a coffee table topic of conversation. He had said back in 09 and 08 that there might someday be banker Nuremberg trials. Well, then in 2011, out of nowhere, he just surprised us and said, "Hey, boys, we're not going to have any banker Nuremberg trials. Instead, we're going to have old-fashioned justice." And I came back and said, "You mean like Jamie Dimon's going to disappear?" And he said, "No, they're protected. They're elite, like Hank Paulson and Bush. They're protected. They might be kidnapped, but they won't be killed. It'll all be done with a purpose." And I said, "Okay, sounds like the mid-level bankers are going to be murdered." And he said, "Probably, yeah." And then I came back and said, "It's not going to be the high-level ones like the directors, the board members, the CEOs, the VPs. No, the director, they're not going to be murdered because they're made men. They're of rank. And it's not going to be the low-level guys like my friend's wife, who's a loan officer at a bank in Boston. She doesn't know anything. She didn't do anything. She wouldn't know what an offshore account is. So what's going to be happening, I said this in the summer of 2011, I said the unprotected mid-level bankers who know too much, who did the mule runs, who set up the offshore accounts, who made the meetings with vile figures and handed off, 20 billion in bearer bonds. The ones who set these companies up, the ones who did the wire transfers using the secretive accounts, the ones who know how to get into the layered networks and rummage around and cover their tracks months later. They're all going to be murdered. So then the question was to The Voice, how many of them are there? And he said, somewhere between 200 and 500. And I said, "You mean they're all going to be murdered?" And he said, "There'll come a day when maybe you'll hear that 200 to 300 are at risk of being murdered." And the V, who's a London banker type, I don't know much about him, but I heard some things through Steve Quayle. He came out and actually said that there are 340 people on a list. And he made a statement that one of them is a higher up, meaning a VP for Citibank. Okay, that violates the rule of mid-level banker being the limit. Well, then we might get some attention paid to this issue if a VP of, say, Forex trading is murdered on Long Island when he's fishing off the Hamptons with his family, and he's dead. Whoops. In Costa Rica, we have a joke. We say that he'll be tangled in fishing line. They don't execute people in Costa Rica with a bullet in the head. What they do is they take him fishing, and his body is found a week later, all green and rotten and whatever, with fishing line wrapped around him. Oh, he was fishing and he had an accident. It just gives you a little bit of plausible deniability on a murder. It's pretty funny, but there are a lot of other things that are being hidden, like Bush family pilferage of big funds associated with the U.S. government. I think the big motive, though, is to be murder for preventing the revelation of integration with LIBOR, Forex, and gold market derivatives. They're all related. And, I got a final comment regarding LIBOR. Isn't it interesting that 2 years ago, the fraud was first revealed and not a single conviction, not a single remedy, not a single award to victims was made? And why is that? The answer is simple. Because the damages are in the tens of trillions of dollars. And they can be easily proved, and they'll never be remedied, period. It'll be covered up. We're in the kill the engineer phase. we've all heard stories of engineers were hired to make a high-tech hidden location vault in the Swiss hills, and then following weeks after it's all done, 16 engineers are all found dead. They got to kill the engineers, the financial engineers. And, it's a really sad thing because these guys are young. They're just smart in the wrong place at the wrong time. They're in their 30s or late 20s. They got families. They probably figured, well, I have no choice. If I'm going to keep this job, I must set up this offshore account for Enron. I must do it. Harvard's involved with Enron. So is JP Morgan. So is Citigroup. That got pretty well covered up. But now we got something bigger. LIBOR, Forex, and gold derivatives. And there's a common denominator with all of them, and it's Deutsche Bank. What's happened with Deutsche Bank is that the Western prosecutors and bankers, the Anglo-American bankers, have lost control of their partner in Deutsche Bank. And BaFin, I think this is the good hats, the white hats. They're on the job, and they're forcing the flips, as they say, vice presidents who are implicated. They're trying to minimize their punishment, sentences, and fines and lost property assets by providing data. And as the data comes forward, more people are put on the edge, and they're found jumping out of windows or being thrown out of very tight windows that require the help of two men to push them out for their suicide.
Hey, Jim, if you want a wild card here, in the last couple of months, the Russians presumably have released a number of phone calls regarding the Ukraine that have been very, very damaging to the U.S. And they might be able to do that with economic stuff as well.
I think they've already started.
It's not just the NSA out there in the big bad world.
Well, the NSA is the nexus for this, but wasn't it the Germans who revealed their anger for all the different NSA eavesdropping that had to do with trade deals, trade meetings, summits?
Yeah, Merkel was quite annoyed.
Yeah, Merkel was very annoyed, and I made a joke with my own clients that maybe some of her bedroom antics were revealed to the wrong people. But there was another side of this, the Australian-Japanese trade talks. Some of the Snowden files revealed that those trade talks were violated, and the U.S. NSA helped the Australians to monitor the other side with the Japanese to gain advantage. Yeah, I agree with you. There's going to be an industrial angle to this, a commercial angle, where the United States is going to suffer more isolation as a result of parties that just don't want to play with the United States anymore. You're not a good corporate citizen. You're not a global community citizen of value anymore. You don't have integrity. We can't trust you. Besides, look what you did with the Saudis after 60 years of partnership with them. You threw them under the bus. You're trying to undermine their governments, and now you're stealing their gold. This is what the U.S. is going to be revealed for, and I think is going to be isolated in a tremendous way. There was a big contract that Brazil reneged on. I think it was worth $4.5 billion. It was for aviation equipment, fighter aircraft, commercial aircraft, and the entire contract has been moved to Sweden, a big Swedish conglomerate. Few people know that Saab has an airplane fighter aircraft division. So the Saudis are going to have Swedish fighter aircraft before long. It's not just there. There's another big deal. I can't remember who. Oh, UAE. They had some telecommunications satellites, and they held up the whole deal. It was worth $1.5 billion, I think, because the satellites had NSA communication relays in it. So they wanted them all removed, and they'll work them out. They'll get the deals done, and they'll probably offer some surveillance of the UAE enemies to the royals of Abu Dhabi. I mean, the way that this fascist global state grows is that one nation after another wants to get an edge on their enemies. Snowden revealed, for instance, how just consider like the Dutch and the Germans. Well, the Dutch are offered no monitoring of Dutch, but plenty of monitoring of Germans on the different sites in the Netherlands. And then the Germans are offered no monitoring of the Germans, but plenty of monitoring of the Dutch and other Europeans from the German sites. But what they don't get told is that all the information has no barriers. So that there's no, it's all seamless. So any information collected in the Netherlands is matched up with any information collected in Germany, and it all goes into the big database. So all these nations are going to be duped and made stupid, fooled by cutting deals to go after their enemies when the NSA is going to capture them all.
Well, they know that, and Putin is telling them that.
Well, Putin's telling them that now, but as these deals are cut one by one, it's not altogether clear. What the U.S. tells nations is that we will only monitor foreigners who might be a threat to your country. Okay, well, what do you do with the information? Do you offer it to my enemies? The answer is yeah, because they're cutting deals with them too. Now, the U.S. needs to be isolated. And, we really don't need to focus too much on the NSA. You need to focus on the Treasury bonds because they're being dumped. They're being dumped in the QE. My forecast is that by the end of 2014, it's going to be common knowledge that the QE volume tripled. They didn't taper it, they tripled it. Country after country is going to be dumping, and just in the last month, and this is not the delayed tick data, Treasury and Investment Capital report. I might not be correct, but the TIC report. There's another one. It's a Department of Treasury up-to-date report that's only 3 or 4 days delayed, and it's showing $100 billion of Treasury bonds were removed during a 1-month period from global accounts held by the Fed. $100 billion in 1 month. Well, there's your effect from the Ukraine. And where'd that all get lapped up? Oh, I got news for you. There was a Treasury bond rally when that happened. Really? $100 billion dumped by foreign account holders, and there was a rally? Huh. Smells to me like they increased QE and they ramped up the interest rate derivatives. And in the meantime, lastly, Belgium has appeared on the map as being holders now of $200 billion worth of Treasury bonds. Can you say Euro Central Bank?
Hey, Jim, I was always wondering what infinity meant, QE to infinity. And I think the answer is Belgium.
It could be. When we had in 2012 or late 11, the first QE introduced, I said this is going to go on endlessly to QE2, QE3, QE4, and QE infinity. Of course, I was called stupid because didn't they say it was temporary? And when zero interest rate was introduced in 2009, I said this is going to be 0% interest forever. And of course I got called stupid because didn't they say it was temporary? All right, so those are two jackass forecasts. 0% forever and QE to infinity. And now the infinite is also volume. Watch this get ramped up because the new big game on the global commercial acquisition stage is spend your Treasury bonds on these hard asset acquisitions before they go worthless. Here's one of the weirdest little facts that I've heard, and it's confirmed by 2 or 3 others. Nations of the world right now and their central banks are already dumping their Treasury bonds with a 35% discount to the value. Now,
that's pretty radical.
Now convert it to valuation, from valuation to interest rate. It converts to something like 12 to 15% on the long bond. So what they do is they maintain perceived value with the interest rate derivatives and soaking up the supply with from due to the absent demand with QE bond monetization. And then in the back doors, all these central banks are dumping in favor of their local currencies and doing so at a 35% discount. The voices confirm that. My Costa Rican military guy, Cato, has confirmed that, and Euroraj has confirmed that. This is very big. The dumping is well along, and it is the Achilles heel of the Anglo-Americans. It's not so much their criminal behavior with LIBOR, Forex, and gold. Now, what's going to get them is their isolation with the Treasury bond that no one's going to want, and they're going to have to maintain the value of them, maintain the integrity of the market. The integrity is gone. They're going to have to maintain the illusion of integrity, and this is where things come, I think, crashing down. And it's precisely what Putin is going to do. But there's an old saying, a card used is a card that loses value. So the threat not delivered with the Treasury bond dumping is the threat that Putin can maintain control of the situation with. He can always say, hey, wait a minute, you do that and we'll start dumping treasuries. A month later,
Jim.
you do that and we'll start dumping treasuries. So he's not going to dump treasuries, but quietly they are. In Cyprus, they were converting treasury bonds to gold bullion. And that's one reason Cyprus got attacked. Notice that there's no global bail-in going on for accounts and banking systems. It's because Cyprus was not the event that we were told it was.
Hey, Jim. Years ago, decades ago, I was a serious chess player, and so I got to deal with Soviets and all that. But anyway, in the chess world, there's a famous saying that the threat is stronger than the execution. And that's Putin would be coming from a chess culture, and so I think he's going to totally agree with you on that. Well, Jim, I think we've had you for quite a long time here. You've been generous with your time. But before we wrap it up, could you give listeners a chance to get some information, your website, your newsletter, that kind of thing?
Sure. Well, let me just make a little rejoinder comment. You mentioned chess, and Putin is a chess master. I saw a funny picture the other day where he's playing several chess games at the same time, chess matches. He's got Cameron of England, he's got Obama of the U.S., he's got Merkel of Germany. But there's a move in chess, and I used to like to try to do it, but it's very difficult to do. Opportunities are not always there. It's called a delayed check. But you move like your bishop, and by your move, you line up a check on the king. But the move of your bishop enables you to take the queen. So a delayed check is coming. On www.goldenjackass.com, you will find a lot of different things. There's a main web page, a public page, where I've got interviews like this and other interviews. I've got public articles. They're all shameless promotional pieces to get new subscribers because I'm running a business here. But there's a lot on them, and people who are new to this can read some of the articles and listen to some of the interviews and come up to get some more sophistication and more knowledge about what's happening, because this is very confusing stuff. I call it actually five-dimensional chess, where at any one point you've got 2 or 3 dimensions which are active. But after a while, it might be wise or useful or helpful to you to sign up for my newsletter. In the newsletter, which is right now enjoying its 10-year anniversary, I just had issue number 120, you will find 2 reports. One is the Money War report, and the second is the Golden Currency report. The Money War report is high level. It's about games like Ukraine. It's about challenges to the Treasury bond. It's about Petrodollar developments and the newly coming Petro-Yuan birth. It's about throwing the Saudis under the bus. It's about high-level things. Then the Gold and Currency report is about demand for gold, coins with the mints. It's about the Indian situation with smuggling and the volumes for that. It's about the Iran workaround with the Turkish intermediary and how they get that all done. It's a lot of ground-level details. This war, this is not a global financial crisis. GFC is its acronym. The global financial crisis is actually a global monetary war to retain control of the dollar and the fiat currency regime so that the elite can continue to print themselves trillion-dollar gifts. Only a gold standard prevents them from giving themselves trillion-dollar gifts. In the Ron Paul forced independent audit of the Federal Reserve that took place in 2009 or 10, out came lots of information about an $18 trillion total set of 0% or 0.5% loans to global bankers around the world, followed months later by a $9 trillion set of loans, again to their global banker friends, at almost 0%. They will never be repaid. My joke is that they dispensed $26 trillion in order for their elite friends to buy up the world's assets, because this chapter is ending. While it's ending, they're all just giving themselves money. The global standard for gold is coming back. The gold standard will return in the form of a trade standard that does not come out of the currency arena, the Forex, does not come out of the banks. It's going to come out of the barter system, gold trade settlement on a net basis, bilateral barter agreements set up, peer-to-peer systems for distributed payments. It might include something like Bitcoin. I don't really know. I don't really care. But what I do know is that when two partners want to pay each other and get business done, they're going to do it without the U.S. system and the British system. That's what you'll learn if you sign up for the Hat Trick Letter with the two newsletters, the two reports that come out every month, 2 reports per month. I appreciate having me on. It's a pleasure. I know a lot of editing to get this thing done from a bad connection in Central America, but it's a pleasure being on, and I hope to be on again in the future.
Hey, Jim, thanks for your time. We do appreciate it. And Jerry, you too.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, folks, it's a wrap. Till next time. Bye-bye.